So how do you actually put together a travel budget? We're going to share with you this week how we put together our travel budget and even reveal how much our budget is for our 4th year of full-time travel. Who are we?
We are EatWalkLearn, Chris and Steve. We have been traveling the world full-time for the last 3 years and tracking our expenses, and we share some of our costs with you. And this is the time of year where we're starting to plan for our next year of full-time travel. So we don't do an annual January to December thing. We started in June of 2001. So now we're starting
2021. We'd be 25 years in this. Oh, Eddie, we're gonna
started in 2021 of full-time travel. And now we're starting our 4th year, so it's time to do our budget. And a lot of our listeners have asked us about how we put together a budget. They give us a lot of feedback about the different ways that they manage their money and they manage their budget. And so we decided to put together a how-to.
So we're going to actually share 5 simple steps for how to put together a budget. And we're going to use our real life example for putting together that budget and the steps that we go through. But it's really important, even though we're going to share with you at the end of the video how much our budget is for our 4th year, it doesn't matter if you are $1 million budget or a $20,000 budget for your full-time travel. These steps apply in any situation. So even if our number is different than yours, watch all 5 steps so you can use these steps to help you make your budget too. So what is step number 1?
Well, step number 1 is if we're going to know if we're on budget or off budget, we have to be able to track our spending. And this can be done in a variety of different ways. We've seen different people using different kinds of applications. We have a very simple approach, and that is that we use our credit cards to buy most everything. And at the end of the month, we just download a spreadsheet into Google Sheets that has a list of everything that we spent and what we spent it on and the categories that we spent it on.
Right. We use Chase credit cards, and it's so nice because they itemize each category. So we can see on the screen here all the different categories that Chase uses, and that's how we categorize all of our spending and figure out what kind of money we're going to spend throughout the year. We also have our history with all the tracking that we've done, so we can see not only what we've done, but we can look at those categories and anticipate by the category what we might do in the future.
Right. And as you can see from this chart, the arrows show you the categories that we use. We don't use all of the categories that Chase can put things into. For example, if we were to happen to buy gas and we showed it on our actual spending, we just put that into a transportation budget. But you might be a little bit different. You might have, be driving a car, and you want to break out your gas spending and your car spending as a separate category.
Right.
So this is just the list of the things that Chase does. Again, you might be using other credit cards that have different categories, but again, it's simple. And the other factor is that when we first got started in full-time travel, we didn't have a lot of data to draw from. Now we've got 3 years of data that we can look at to predict the future.
So step 2, especially for those folks who don't have any tracking for step 1, you're going to start with step 2, and that is figure out where you're going. Now, sometimes you don't know what it costs where you're going, and one of the websites that's really good to use to figure that out, which we used when we first started when we didn't have any tracking, was a website called Numbeo. Now, Numbeo is super because it shows this heat map. You really like that heat map.
Yeah, the heat map, the example that we're showing here is for Europe, and red means that these are more expensive cities, and green means that these are less expensive areas. And it just gives you an idea of, where you could go and how much things cost in different parts of the world.
And maybe you have a giant budget that you can go in all the red places, or maybe you have a small budget that you have to go in all the green places, or maybe you're in between and you have to, kind of do some red and then some green and some yellow. That's called geo arbitrage. That's what a lot of people, you might use that term a lot when you hear other nomads. Nomads use that term a lot, and you might hear that. But it's just all geo arbitrage means is you're trying to balance your budget based on what the cost of things are around the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Numbeo has a lot of other features. The one that I particularly like is it gives you an opportunity to compare different cities and different locations. So you can see, for example, here, We started in Denver, Colorado before we started traveling, and this compares the costs in Denver, Colorado to Split, Croatia. Great city, and what Numbeo is showing you here is that it's really less expensive to live there than it is to live in Denver, Colorado. But you got to be careful because we're traveling. We're not like moving there full time. So you really can't use these numbers as like, hey, Numbeo said that my housing was going to cost $1,000 a month, and it was wrong.
It might if you're living there for 12 months a year, but not if you're a nomad. So in order to get a better understanding of what a real number might be for the largest part of your budget, which is accommodation, look at Airbnb. So pull up Airbnb and think about what your assumptions are for where you want to stay. So let's for example talk about us and our assumptions about our accommodations. We know we want to be in at least 1-bedroom locations. We know we want to have a washer. We want to know we have a dryer. So we will go into Airbnb. We'll filter based on our assumptions. We're 2 people. We want a washer. We want a dryer. We want a water view, whatever. And we'll see what the costs are in a particular location. Compare that to Numbeo, and then really realize what our actual real number is going to be for accommodation.
Yeah, absolutely. Although sometimes we'll use Airbnb, sometimes we're not going to use Airbnb. It's a great way to really understand what are the costs in a particular community by looking at real example.
Right. So some other assumptions people might have. So now we're actually talking about step 3. So step 1 was track. Step 2 is know where you're going. Step 3 is understand what your assumptions are. So we talked about just about our assumptions with accommodation, but in relation to travel, are you going to travel by air? Are you going to do first class, business class? Are you going to do ferries? Are you going to do train? What types of transportation might you use, which is really going to affect your budget? Yeah. And then maybe you're a wine taster and you want to taste wine around the world. Do you need to make a wine budget? Or are you a beer crafter or a craft beer person? Do you need to go and put money towards craft beer habit?
Well, and we have friends that are going on African safaris,
right.
that are walking the Camino, that are taking around the world cruises. I mean, these are things, if you have an ideas of some of the big things that you're going to do and your kind of travel lifestyle, it's easy to come up with assumptions on what those kinds of things are going to cost.
Right. So step 4 then is, now you've got your assumptions identified, you understand kind of how you're going to maintain your lifestyle. Step 4 is when you're figuring out your budget, start big and go to small. So the first part we know from our tracking, our big number is always accommodation. And in accommodation, we've got 4 subcategories, right? So we've got cruises is accommodation, Airbnb is accommodation, hotels accommodation, and friends and family are accommodation. You might have camping or other sorts of accommodation that we're not thinking about, but those are ours. So when we look at our accommodation budget, we then take a look at how many days we think we're going to stay in that type of accommodation for the year. Then we figure out what the nightly cost is for that type of accommodation.
Yeah, so it's easy. Again, we're just taking the number of days, for example, in Airbnbs, and how much we think it's going to cost per night for an Airbnb. Multiply those two together, and that's how much money you're gonna spend in that type of accommodation. Now, how do we come up with the assumptions of what how much we think it's going to spend per night? One of the things that we do in Airbnbs is we typically are going to do 28 days or longer, so it's going to give you a monthly discount, and that's pretty substantial. Again, depending on what you do. We showed you the example of you just go to the Airbnb website and look at it, and then just break it down onto a per night basis. Hotels is another one that's a little bit tricky because we tend to use a lot of hotel points. And an advantage is we also do a lot of house sitting, and house sitting doesn't cost anything per night. So we kind of estimate that. Is it perfect? No, because we're just at this point, we're projecting a year out. We're really just guessing. We're making good assumptions about that.
Right. And so if you look at the chart, you see on the left the column of the types of housing. In the middle, you see the cost per night that we estimate based on what our tracking has been over time. How many days we're going to stay there, which is, again, our estimate of how we think we're going to move around the world for the year. And then multiply those two numbers together, you get a total cost. And then you can see some of our assumptions over there on the right-hand side for just notes for ourselves at how we got to that number. So what we see for us for this coming year is we have a $17,900 or $18,000 budget for accommodation spread across the year.
Exactly.
So then the next travel category that we deal with, which is our next largest category, is transportation. Again, going back to those assumptions and looking at where we think we want to be for the year, what do we see?
Yeah, so in this case, kind of breakdown of where are we going and how many times are we going to be flying around. And also making some assumptions around that, because we're going to be doing a lot of flying this year, but we're doing short distance kind of flying, like throughout Europe or from around South America. We don't do a lot of long distance flights, and we also typically always do economy flying. We're not going to spend money on
because we're on Ryanair. I mean, it doesn't make sense to, I don't even know that Ryanair has business flights, but for 45 minutes, we don't need a business flight. So we anticipate that we're going to do 20 flights a piece, or 40 flights total that we'll pay for, $125 average for those flights, making our total cost for flying $5,000. And then back to cruising, we take our total amount that we cruise with and we split that up across our different categories. So back in the accommodation, you saw 40% of the 10,000 was 4,000. You see for our travel category, we do 30% of that total cruise spend, which is $3,000. And then all our other transportation for the year, that's Ubers and trains and ferries and all the, one ticket at a time type of places. That's $3,000. Or our total transportation assumption, make all the assumptions that we have. The budget for that is $11,000 for the year.
Right. So we talked about our housing category. We talked about our transportation category. Those are really two big nuts. The next that's just about as big as those is food.
Right.
You gotta eat, right? And the good news in this category is when we first started, we really didn't know how much money we were going to spend. But now we've got 3 years of tracking, and we're pretty consistent on that. It goes up and it goes down. It's easily explainable. But we break, actually, because Chase breaks our actual out into groceries and eating out, food, other. So we would break that out too. So what we just did is we just looked at what is the last 36 months that we spent on groceries, also realizing that there is inflation and prices are going up.
So in their two categories, we have the dining out and the groceries. The dining out, based on just our history, our budget this year is $12,000. And for groceries, surprisingly, it's only $2,800. Based on our tracking, that's what we spend on groceries. And that's what we're going to go for this year for our budget.
Yeah.
So the next category after our travel and transportation is health and wellness. This is our insurance. This is gym memberships. This is overall. And this particular year, we had to buy a travel policy. Last year, we didn't need to have one because we were in the States for half the year. You can watch our videos on medical insurance elsewhere. Not going to go into details on that. But for this particular year, our budget is up 107% because we have to pick up travel insurance, making it a $4,800 year on travel insurance, or basically health and wellness, which is mostly our travel medical insurance. Shopping, we don't shop very much. I mean, this is just our clothes or another backpack or carry-on suitcase or something. That comes in at $3,600, again, based on our tracking. And then entertainment, again, based on tracking, is $4,000 for the year. And our bills and utilities, also based on tracking. And this is our cell phone, a newspaper subscription, and our mail service, and so on. This is $1,800. So, you want to do a drum roll?
So, let's do a drum roll.
So, what is our annual budget that we're projecting for next year? We're giving ourselves a raise. It is $58,000, which is a 12% raise over our $52,000 budget last year.
Yeah, so we're increasing what we think we're going to spend by 12% to $58,000. That's a little bit over. It's a little bit under $5,000 per month, $4,800 per month.
Yep.
And this may not be your budget.
Right.
You're going to have different assumptions. You're going to be going different places than we're going. You travel differently than we do. But this is our budget, and these are the steps that we went through in order to get this budget.
Step number 5.
I want to give you step number 5, and that is make changes, make adjustments. You have to track your spending. You have to know how much you're spending versus compared to your budget, Are you high this month? Are you low this month? Are you doing things that you said you weren't going to do, right? Like you're doing that African safari when you said you're going to be walking the Camino or whatever.
Right.
So things are going to change. Absolutely, they're going to change. It's okay to adjust your budget. It's okay to change your assumptions and stay on track.
Yeah. And we should also add, even though this is our budget, this is not what we can spend every year. So even if we go over budget, we don't have to go back to work. We don't have to stop traveling. We don't have to drop down to economy class everywhere. I mean, this is just our budget, and it's our attempt to try to track our expenses and appropriately live in the world without causing us to get crazy.
We don't want to get crazy.
No.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, please post them below. We hope we've made this pretty straightforward, these 5 steps. You can scroll back and forward in the video. We've got slides up so you can see where the steps are. If you get lost in one of them, please ask us questions. Also, do us a favor. See these beautiful microphones that we have? We got those because you watched a few of the commercials of our YouTube channel. When you watch a commercial, we get money. With that money, we can buy equipment and make our videos better each time. So do us a favor. Just watch 1 or 2. You don't have to watch them all. If you want to watch them all, great. And then also subscribe and share this video with some of your friends. If you've got friends that are trying to figure out how to travel and how to budget and how to be financially independent, maybe perhaps, these budgeting tips might help them too. So thank you very much. We are going to say goodbye to the U.S. and head off to Europe for the summer. Next time we see you, we'll be calling you from Europe. Talk to you soon.